Hello, my friend, my niece, my sweet niece. I hope you are having a good day or a good night or a good morning, whatever time of day it is that you're listening to this. I'm ready to read chapter 13, and it's called Snow White, Rose Red. Just before Thanksgiving, the affairs of the Simpsons reached what might have been called a crisis, even in their family, which had been born and reared in a state of adventurous poverty and perilous uncertainty. Riverboro was doing its best to return the entire tribe of Simpsons to the land of its fathers, so to speak, thinking rightly that the town which had given them birth, rather than the town of their adoption, should feed them and keep a roof over their heads until the children were of an age for self-support. There was little to eat in the household and less to wear, though Mrs. Simpson did, as always, her poor best. The children managed to satisfy their appetites by sitting modestly outside their neighbors' kitchen doors when meals were about to be served. They were not exactly popular favorites, but they did receive certain undesirable morsels from the more charitable housewives. Life was rather dull and dreary, however, and in the chill and gloom of November weather, with the vision of other people's turkeys bursting with fat and other people's golden pumpkins and squashes and corn being garnered into barns, the young Simpsons groped about for some inexpensive form of excitement, and settled upon the selling of soap for a premium. They had sold enough to their immediate neighbors during the earlier autumn to secure a child's handcart which, though very weak on its pins, could be trundled over the country roads. With large business sagacity, an executive, sagacity, the quality of being, I hate this. Teachers always say not to use the word or any form of the word in your definition, and dictionaries do it all the time. It says the quality of being sagacious or something, a man of great political sagacity. So I don't know what it means. Maybe we can figure it out from the context. Anywho, with large business and an executive capacity which must have been inherited from their father, they now propose to extend their operations to a larger area and distribute soap to contiguous villages, if these villages could be induced to buy. The Excelsior Soap Company paid a very small return of any kind to its infantile agents, who were scattered through the state, but it inflamed their imaginations by the issue of circulars with highly colored pictures of the premiums to be awarded for the sale of a certain number of cakes. It was at this juncture that Clara Bell and Susan Simpson consulted Rebecca, who threw herself solidly and wholeheartedly into the enterprise, promising her help and that of Emma Jane Perkins. The premiums within their possible grasp were 3: a bookcase, a plush reclining chair, and a banquet lamp. Of course, the Simpsons had no books, and casting aside, without thought or pang, the plush chair, which might have been of some use in a family of 7 persons, not counting Mr. Simpson, who ordinarily sat elsewhere at the town's expense, they warmed themselves rapturously in the vision of the banquet lamp, which speedily became to them more desirable than food, drink, or clothing. Neither Emma Jane nor Rebecca perceived anything incongruous in the idea of the Simpsons striving for a banquet lamp. They looked at the picture daily and knew that if they themselves were free agents, they would toil, suffer, and sweat for the happy privilege of occupying the same room with that lamp through the coming winter evenings. It looked to be about 8 feet tall in the catalogue, and Emma Jane advised Clarabelle to measure the height of the Simpson ceiling, but a note in the margin of the circular informed them that it stood 2.5 feet. when set up in all its dignity and splendor on a proper table, $3 extra. It was only of polished brass, continued the circular, though it was invariably mistaken for solid gold, and the shade that accompanied it, at least it accompanied it if the agent sold 100 extra cakes, was of crinkled crepe paper printed in a dozen delicious hues, from which the joy-dazzled agent might take his choice. I'm noticing that the light is really bright coming from the window. There, now you can see me. Hi. Sorry, I'm going to just deal with it. All right. Seesaw Simpson was not in the syndicate. Clara Bell was rather a successful agent, but Susan, who could only say "thope," never made large returns, and the twins, who were somewhat young to be thoroughly trustworthy, could be given only half a dozen cakes at a time, and were obliged to carry them on their business trips a brief document stating the price per cake, dozen, and box. Rebecca and Emma Jane offered to go 2 or 3 miles in some one direction and see what they could do in the way of stirring up a popular demand for the Snow White and Rose Red brands, the former being devoted to laundry purposes and the latter being intended for the toilet. There was a great amount of hilarity in the preparation for this event, and a long council in Emma Jane's attic. They had the soap company's circular from which to arrange a proper speech, and they had, what was still better, the remembrance of a certain patent medicine vendor's discourse at the Milltown Fair. His method, when once observed, could never be forgotten, nor his manner, nor his vocabulary. Emma Jane practiced it on Rebecca, and Rebecca on Emma Jane. "Can I sell you a little soap this afternoon? It is called the Snow White and Rose Red Soap. 6 cakes in an ornamental box, only 20 cents for the white, 25 cents for the red. It is made from the purest ingredients, and if desired, could be eaten by an invalid with relish and profit." "Oh, Rebecca, don't let's say that," interposed Emma Jane hysterically. "It makes me feel like a fool." "It takes so little to make you feel like a fool, Emma Jane," rebuked Rebecca, "that sometimes I think you must be one. I don't get to feeling like a fool so awfully easy. Now leave out that eating part if you don't like it and go on." "The Snow White is probably the most remarkable laundry soap ever manufactured. Immerse the garments in a tub, lightly rubbing the more soiled portions with the soap. Leave them submerged in water from sunset to sunrise, and then the youngest baby can wash them without the slightest effort." "Babe, not baby," corrected Rebecca from the circular. "It's just the same thing," argued Emma Jane. "Of course it's just the same thing, but a baby has got to be called babe or infant in a circular, the same as it is in poetry. Would you rather say infant?" "No," grumbled Emma Jane. "Infant is worse even than babe. Rebecca, do you think we'd better do as the circular says, and let Elijah or Elisha try the soap before we begin selling?" "I can't imagine a babe doing a family wash with any soap," answered Rebecca. "But it must be true, or they would never dare to print it, so don't let's bother." "Oh, won't it be the greatest fun, Emma Jane? At some of the houses, where they can't possibly know me, I shan't be frightened, and I shall reel off the whole rigmarole, invalid, babe, and all. Perhaps I shall say even the last sentence, if I can remember it. We sound every chord in the great macrocosm of satisfaction." This conversation took place on a Friday afternoon at Emma Jane's house, where Rebecca, to her unbound joy, was to stay over Sunday, her aunts having gone to Portland to the funeral of an old friend. Saturday being a holiday, they were going to have the old white horse drive to North Riverboro, 3 miles away, eat a 12 o'clock dinner with Emma Jane's cousins, and be back at 4 o'clock punctually. When the children asked Mrs. Perkins if they could call at just a few houses coming and going and sell a little soap for the Simpsons, she at first replied decidedly in the negative. She was an indulgent parent, however, and really had little objection to Emma Jane amusing herself in this unusual way. It was only for Rebecca, as the niece of the difficult Miranda Sawyer, that she raised scruples. But when fully persuaded that the enterprise was a charitable one, she acquiesced. The girls called at Mr. Watson's store and arranged for several large boxes of soap to be charged to Clara Belle Simpson's account. These were lifted into the back of the wagon, and a happier couple never drove along the country road than Rebecca and her companion. It was a glorious Indian summer day, which suggested nothing of Thanksgiving near at hand. Which suggested nothing of Thanksgiving near at hand as it was. It was a restly day, a scarlet and buff, yellow and carmine, bronze and crimson day. There were still many leaves on the oaks and maples, making a goodly show of red and brown and gold. The air was sparkling cider, and every field had its heaps of yellow and russet good things to eat, all ready for the barns, the mills, and the markets. The horse forgot his 20 years, sniffed the sweet bright air, and trotted like a colt. Nokomis Mountain looked blue and clear in the distance. Rebecca stood in the wagon and apostrophized the landscape with sudden joy of living. Great, wide, beautiful, wonderful world, with the wonderful water round you curled, and the wonderful grass upon your breast. World, you are beautifully dressed. Dull Emma Jane had never seemed to Rebecca so near, so dear, so tried and true, and Rebecca to Emma Jane's faithful heart had never been so brilliant, so bewildering, so fascinating as in this visit together, with its intimacy, its freedom, and the added delights of an exciting business enterprise. A gorgeous leaf blew into the wagon. Does color make you sort of dizzy? Asked Rebecca. No, answered Emma Jane after a long pause. No, it don't, not a mite. Perhaps dizzy isn't just the right word, but it's nearest. I'd like to eat color and drink it and sleep in it. If you could be a tree, which one would you choose? Emma Jane had enjoyed considerable experience of this kind, and Rebecca had succeeded in unstopping her ears, ungluing her eyes, and loosening her tongue, so that she could play the game after a fashion. I'd rather be an apple tree in blossom, that one that blooms pink by our pig pen. Rebecca laughed. There was always something unexpected in Emma Jane's replies. I choose to be that scarlet maple just on the edge of the pond there, and she pointed with the whip. Then I could see so much more than your pink apple tree by the pig pen. I could look at all the rest of the woods, see my scarlet dress in my beautiful looking glass, and watch all the yellow and brown trees growing upside down in the water. When I'm old enough to earn money, I'm going to have a dress like this leaf, all ruby color, thin, you know, with a sweeping train and roughly curly edges. Then I think I'll have a brown sash like the trunk of the tree, and where could I be green? Do they have green petticoats, I wonder? I'd like a green petticoat coming out now, and then underneath to show what my leaves were like before I was a scarlet maple. I think it would be awfully homely, said Emma Jane. I'm going to have a white satin with a pink sash, pink stockings, bronze slippers, and a spangled fan. That's the end of that chapter. I'll go ahead and read the next chapter. The next chapter is called Mr. Aladdin, or Aladdin. I wonder which it's supposed to be. Aladdin or Aladdin. Chapter 14. A single hour's experience of the vicissitudes incident to a business career clouded the children's spirits just the least bit. They did not accompany each other to the doors of their chosen victims, feeling sure that together they could not approach the subject seriously, but they parted at the gate of each house, the one holding the horse, while the other took the soap samples and interviewed any one who seemed of a coming-on disposition. Emma Jane had disposed of 3 single cakes, Rebecca of 3 small boxes, for a difference in their ability to persuade the public was clearly defined at the start, though neither of them ascribed either success or defeat to anything but the imperious force of circumstances. Housewives looked at Emma Jane and desired no soap, listened to her description of its merits and still desired none. Other stars in their courses governed Rebecca's doings. The people whom she interviewed either remembered their present need of soap, or reminded themselves that they would need it in the future. The notable point in the case being that lucky Rebecca accomplished with almost no effort results that poor little Emma Jane failed to attain by hard and conscientious labor. It's your turn, Rebecca, and I'm glad too, said Emma Jane, drawing up to a gateway and indicating a house that was set a considerable distance from the road. I haven't got over trembling from the last place yet. A lady had put her head out of an upstairs window and called, "Go away, little girl. Whatever you have in your box, we don't want any." I don't know who lives here, and the blinds are all shut in front. If there's nobody at home, you mustn't count it, but take the next house as yours. Rebecca walked up the lane and went to the side door. There was a porch there, and seated in a rocking chair, husking corn, was a good-looking young man, or was he middle-aged? Rebecca could not make up her mind. At all events, he had an air of the city about him, well-shaven face, well-trimmed mustache, well-fitting clothes. Rebecca was a trifle shy at this unexpected encounter, but there was nothing to be done but explain her presence, so she asked, "Is the lady of the house at home?" "I am the lady of the house at present," said the stranger with a whimsical smile. "What can I do for you?" "Have you ever heard of would you like, do you need any soap?" queried Rebecca. "Do I look as if I did?" he responded unexpectedly. Rebecca dimpled. "I didn't mean that. I have some soap to sell. I would like to introduce you to a very remarkable soap, the best now on the market. It is called Oh, I must know that soap," said the gentleman genially. "Made out of pure vegetable fats, isn't it?" "The very purest," corroborated Rebecca. "No acid in it?" "Not a trace." "And yet a child could do the Monday washing with it and use no force." "A babe," corrected Rebecca. "Oh, a babe, eh? That child grows younger every year instead of older, wise child." This was great good fortune to find a customer who knew all the virtues of the article in advance. Rebecca dimpled more and more, and at her new friend's invitation sat down on a stool at his side near the edge of the porch. The beauties of the ornamental box which held the rose red were disclosed, and the prices of both that and the snow white were unfolded. Presently she forgot all about her silent partner at the gate, and was talking as if she had known this grand personage all her life. "I'm keeping house today, but I don't live here," explained the delightful gentleman. "I'm just on a visit to my aunt who has gone to Portland. I used to be here as a boy, and I am very fond of the spot." "I don't think anything takes the place of the farm where one lived when one was a child," observed Rebecca, nearly bursting with pride at having at last successfully used the indefinite pronoun in general conversation. Where one. She wanted to remember when she wrote that funny paragraph with ones and ones and one and one and one. That was funny, I thought. All right. The man darted a look at her and put down his ear of corn. "So you consider your childhood a thing of the past, do you, young lady?" "I can still remember it," answered Rebecca gravely, "though it seems a long time ago." "I can remember mine well enough, and a particularly unpleasant one it was," said the stranger. "So was mine," sighed Rebecca. "What was your worst trouble?" "Lack of food and clothes, principally." "Oh," exclaimed Rebecca sympathetically. "Mine was no shoes and too many babies and not enough books. But you're all right and happy now, aren't you?" she asked doubtfully, for though he looked handsome, well-fed, and prosperous, any child could see that his eyes were tired and his mouth was sad when he was not speaking. "I'm doing pretty well, thank you," said the man with a delightful smile. "Now tell me, how much soap ought I to buy today?" How much has your aunt on hand now?" suggested the very modest and inexperienced agent. "And how much would she need?" "Oh, I don't know about that. Soap keeps, doesn't it?" I'm not certain, said Rebecca conscientiously, but I'll look in the circular. It's sure to tell, and she drew the document from her pocket. What are you going to do with the magnificent profits you get from this business? We are not selling for our own benefit, said Rebecca confidentially. My friend, who is holding the horse at the gate, is the daughter of a very, very rich blacksmith and doesn't need any money. I am poor, but I live with my aunts in a brick house, and of course they wouldn't like me to be a peddler. We are trying to get a premium for some of our friends. Rebecca had never thought of alluding to the circumstances with her previous customers, but unexpectedly she found herself describing Mr. Simpson, Mrs. Simpson, and the Simpson family, their poverty, their joyless life, and their abject need of a banquet lamp to brighten their existence. You needn't argue that point, laughed the man, as he stood up to get a glimpse of the rich blacksmith's daughter at the gate. I can see that they ought to have it if they want it, and especially if you want them to have it. I've known what it was myself to do without a banquet lamp. Now, give me the circular and let's do some figuring. How much do the Simpsons lack at this moment? If they sell 200 more cakes this month and next, they can have the lamp by Christmas, Rebecca answered, and they can get a shade by summertime. But I'm afraid I can't help very much after today because my Aunt Miranda may not like to have me. I see. Well, that's all right. I'll take 300 cakes, and that will give them shade and all. Rebecca had been seated on a stool very near to the edge of the porch, and at this remark she made a sudden movement, tipped over, and disappeared into a clump of lilac bushes. It was a very short distance, fortunately, and the amused capitalist picked her up and set her on her feet and brushed her off. You should never seem surprised when you have taken a large order, said he. You ought to have replied, can't you make it 350 instead of capsizing in that unbusinesslike way? Oh, I could never say anything like that, exclaimed Rebecca, who was blushing crimson at her awkward fall. But it doesn't seem right for you to buy so much. Are you sure you can afford it? If I can't, I'll save on something else, returned the philanthropist. What if your aunt shouldn't like that kind of soap? Queried Rebecca nervously. My aunt always likes what I like, he returned. Mine doesn't, exclaimed Rebecca. Then there's something wrong with your aunt. Or with me, laughed Rebecca. What is your name, young lady? Rebecca Rowena Randall, sir. What? With an amused smile. Both? Your mother was generous. She couldn't bear to give up either of the names, she says. Do you want to hear my name? I think I know already, answered Rebecca with a bright glance. I'm sure you must be Mr. Aladdin in the Arabian Nights. Oh, please, can I run down and tell Emma Jane? She must be so tired waiting, and she will be so glad. At the man's nod of assent, Rebecca sped down the lane, crying irrepressibly as she neared the wagon. Oh, Emma Jane, we're sold out! Mr. Aladdin followed, smiling to corroborate this astonishing, unbelievable statement, lifted all their boxes from the back of the wagon, and taking the circular, promised to write to the Excelsior Company that night concerning the premium. If you could contrive to keep a secret, you two little girls, it would be rather a nice surprise to have the lamp arrive at the Simpsons on Thanksgiving Day, wouldn't it? He asked as he tucked the old lap robe cozily over their feet. They gladly assented and broke into a chorus of excited thanks, during which tears of joy stood in Rebecca's eyes. Oh, don't mention it, laughed Mr. Aladdin, lifting his hat. I was a sort of commercial traveler myself once, years ago, and I like to see the things well done. Goodbye, Miss Rebecca Rowena. Just let me know whenever you have anything to sell, for I am certain beforehand I shall want it. Goodbye, Mr. Aladdin, I surely will, cried Rebecca, tossing back her dark braids delightedly and waving her hand. Oh, Rebecca, said Emma Jane in an awestruck whisper. He raised his hat to us, and we're not 13. It'll be 5 years before we're ladies. Never mind, answered Rebecca. We are the beginnings of ladies even now. He tucked the lap robe round us, too, continued Emma Jane in an ecstasy of reminiscence. Oh, isn't he perfectly elegant? And wasn't it lovely of him to buy us out? And just think of having both the lamp and the shade for one day's work. Aren't you glad you wore your pink gingham now, even if Mother did make you put on a flannel underneath? You do look so pretty in pink and red, Rebecca, and so homely in drab and brown. I know, sighed Rebecca. I wish I was like you, pretty in all colors. And Rebecca looked longingly at Emma Jane's fat, rosy cheeks, at her blue eyes, which said nothing, at her neat nose, which had no character, at her red lips, from between which no word worth listening to had ever issued. Never mind, said Emma Jane comfortingly. Everybody says you're awful bright and smart, and Mother thinks you'll be better looking all the time as you grow older. You wouldn't believe it, but I was a dreadful homely baby, and homely right along till just a year or two ago, when my red hair began to grow dark. What was the nice man's name? I never thought to ask, exclaimed Rebecca. Aunt Miranda would say that was just like me, and it is, but I called him Mr. Aladdin because he gave us a lamp. You know the story of Aladdin and the wonderful lamp. Oh, Rebecca, how could you call him a nickname the very first time you ever saw him? Aladdin isn't a nickname exactly, anyway. He laughed and seemed to like it. By dint of superhuman effort, and putting such a seal upon their lips as never mortals put before, the two girls succeeded in keeping their wonderful news to themselves, although it was obvious to all beholders that they were in an extraordinary and abnormal state of mind. On Thanksgiving, the lamp arrived in a large packing box and was taken out and set up by Seesaw Simpson, who suddenly began to admire and respect the business ability of his sisters. Rebecca had heard the news of its arrival, but waited until nearly dark before asking permission to go to the Simpsons, so that she might see the gorgeous trophy lighted and sending a blaze of crimson glory through its red crepe paper shade. That's the end of that chapter. That was a nice ending. Who do you think that Mr. Aladdin was? I have some guesses myself, but I don't know if they're right. Anywho, the next one is called The Banquet Lamp. But I will read that next time. Bye.